Sheldon, over to you. What do the workers want?
The $1 million question. Well, first of all, thank you everyone so much for having me back again. Just a quick introduction, just for those of you who don't know me. My name's Sheldon Carlisle. I'm a director at Hayes Legal. Previously a lawyer. I retired a bit early. Maybe I should have taken that trusteeship had I known it was coming. But I was a commercial property lawyer at Bevan Britton and Osborne Clarke before moving into legal recruitment about 12 years ago. And I was with you last year and we were looking, it feels like a little bit of deja vu. We were looking last year, July last year, at emerging from lockdown and returning to the office and preparing for that and everything that was involved. And it feels like we're back there again a little bit. And last time we were looking at whether work from home was here to stay. We were looking at well-being, communication, salaries, and I'm sure all of these things are still very much on your radars. And no doubt many of you will have spent an awful lot of time over recent months just preparing for the next return to work, looking at what that means for your staff, for your employees, from so many different factors, perspectives, whether it's risk, insurance, tech, how you supervise, how you performance manage. There's so many factors that have been no doubt high on your radars in terms of what it means to have a remote workforce and then a workforce returning. I'm not going to look at any of those things today. It's purely and deliberately, I want to look at it from a employee perspective. So very much from their sentiment, their expectations, their nervousnesses, their reservations, whatever it might be that they might be coming to the table with. So there's three things I wanted to look at today. Number one, what should a law firm look like going forward? What should a law firm look like? Number two, what employee-centered factors would it be helpful to weigh up when bringing your staff back? And then number three, I just want to leave you with a few recommendations really of things to think about. Every year, I just want to start by saying every year we produce a report called the What Workers Want report, where we look at whatever the current topical conversation piece is for what employees are facing and what their thoughts on it are. So we do pulse surveys regularly, and we've just published our recent one, which I'll make available. I'll ask Claire to circulate after this meeting, which is looking at, is it the end of the 9 to 5, the traditional going to an office, doing your job and going home? Is it the end of it? And we took a survey of about just under 4,500 employers and employees, just getting their sentiments on returning to work and what's on their mind. And just a couple of headline stats for you. 49% of employers that we spoke to, so just under half, said that they would be offering either hybrid or remote working permanently post-COVID. So not just as an interim, get people back in the office and settled and then back to usual, but going forward, nearly half. 24% said they expected employees to be back in 5 days a week. Now, our survey was of all disciplines, all sectors, all industries, so manufacturing, retail, everything you can think of, we sample as a business, as a PLC. So there's going to be some industries that are a lot more suited to, you need boots on the ground to do the job. You know, you can't serve a coffee to someone unless there's someone there to serve the coffee. So of course, there's going to be some industries that are more leaning towards having to have people in the office. But I'd say professional services is definitely going to be on the more hybrid, flexible end of the spectrum. What's interesting is from an employee perspective, 60% of employees we sampled said that they would be either looking for hybrid or remote working in their current role, or they would be moving to get that. So 60%, just under 2/3, said that they were looking for hybrid working or remote working as part of what they're looking for in their role. Interestingly, only 13% said they wanted to work completely remote. So completely remote, not having any contact with an office or going into one. So I guess looking at my three questions of number one, what should a law firm look like going forward? I think we've all realized over the last 15 months, whatever it is, that actually law firms can function remotely. I think that question, can we trust staff to do a good job at home and actually deliver, and for the firm to remain profitable, by and large, has worked. I think most firms would say they've come out doing better than they thought they would have done had you asked them when lockdown first came in. I guess the question is, what is the expectation of lawyers looking at the market and considering what they want for their future? Well, interestingly, in my job, it's the first question I now get asked by lawyers looking for a new job. What's the flexibility arrangement? What's the hybrid arrangement? What is their approach to how many days in the office or how many days at home? What are they proposing? It's the first thing people want to know, even before salary. It's high on the agenda, and I don't think that's going to go anytime soon, because I think the mindset of lawyers is now shifted to seeing this flexibility around where they do their work. That shift has happened now, and I think it's going to be very hard for law firms to argue to their staff, you need to be back here a lot more than you're in a hybrid arrangement. I think that will be a challenge for law firms who do go down that road. So I guess the question then is, well, what is the right balance? And I think that's the million-dollar question, really. And I think it's the question I get asked by partners more than anything else. What's everybody else doing? What are law firms doing? And I think a lot of firms are still working that out. A lot are still in consultation with their staff. And I think the press is filled with lots and lots of stories from from certain sectors, maybe the banking sector, where they're saying, actually, we need people in the office more than we need them at home. Perhaps at the extreme end to, I guess, the more nimble tech industries, where they're saying, actually, it doesn't matter where our people are. And I think law firms are falling somewhere in the middle. As a rule of thumb, is what we're seeing, is what we're hearing on the ground. So I guess the question is then, well, as you're assessing all of the factors, what are the, I guess, employee-centered factors that you need to bear in mind when bringing your staff back? Well, a couple of things, really, I just wanted to throw out for you to think about. The first is actually thinking about what the biggest challenges are going to be for your employees in coming back. So what's on their mind? What are their fears? What are their reservations? Well, we asked this question in our survey for the What Workers Want report. And the top 3 things that employees listed as being the challenges to coming back to the office. Number 1, ironically, was actually agreeing the remote working agreement. 23% of respondees said that they were apprehensive or really worried that their employer was not going to propose and agree a sensible remote working policy. And I think that was a big cause of anxiety for them. And I no doubt many of you have been involved in those consultations. We've had one in ours, and our MD for the UK actually presented the results of our internal survey on returning to the office. And they presented us with 3 different options of what a hybrid policy might look like. And interestingly, 93% of respondees within our business went for one particular option, and that's the option they're going for. And for us as a business, that's a 5 in 10 in the office, 5 days in 10. So a 3 and a 2 alternating days in the office and then days at home. So looking at it, I think agreeing a sensible policy that your lawyers can buy into, your staff can buy into, is highest on their, I guess, concern list. Is it going to be done well? Am I going to get a say in it? And that's quite fundamental. Second biggest challenge was poor morale and motivation. 21% felt that after months in lockdown, with job security worries, with social distancing measures and everything, they were concerned that coming back to the office would lead to a dip in morale and motivation. Coming back into the office, that it would actually be quite difficult to adjust. It's worth bearing that in mind. People have become a bit acclimatized to working from home. It's going to bring a lot for people to get back on the tube or back on the bus or back in the car, commuting in, facing all the challenges of rearranging childcare, everything like that. There's so much that will have an impact on morale, motivation. And that just needs to be borne in mind when consulting and coming up with a good working policy. And then the third biggest challenge, 13% of respondees said that they were concerned that a reduction in headcount, a reduction in colleagues' workforce, was going to have a big impact on their work-life balance, their happiness in work, I guess their well-being in the job. Based on the exits, difficulty to replace. It's a very, very busy market at the moment. There's a lot of jobs out there, not many candidates. So there's a concern that a difficulty with recruitment will lead to increased stress and difficulty for workers coming back. So that's just the three biggest challenges that some of our respondees were saying they're concerned about. And it's worth bearing that in mind as you're consulting and bringing your staff back. The second point under employee-centered factors to take into account is, how do you cater for everyone? How do you please all of the people all of the time when it comes to coming up with a policy? And the reality is you just can't. You can't please all of the people all of the time. And we were having a conversation, I think, at the beginning of this call around demographics and perhaps who wants to be in the office, who wants to be at home. And I think we were touching on some of the perhaps people's stage in life might impact where they want to be doing their job. And in our pulse survey, there's results I'll circulate, you can have a look, but by and large what we noticed was the Generation Zs, Ys actually wanted to be in the office more than they were at home, whereas I guess the more experienced employees actually wanted to be home a lot more. And I guess when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. I think from a junior perspective, being part of the culture, being part of a team, being embedded within an organization, feeling like you're making a difference and you're really engaged and you're visible is very high on the priority list for junior lawyers. And actually, they want to make friends. They actually, I mean, we talk about work-life balance, normally with a predisposition to thinking about it from needing to get the life in there, in the balance. I think it's flipped a little bit in lockdown, where actually a lot of junior lawyers want a work life. They feel like life is just become home and work all embroiled in one little bubble. And the idea of having a work life and a work character and persona is really appealing to them, and they want to get back into the office. I think when we look at more experienced lawyers and more experienced employees, I think they tend to be people who might have more greater caring responsibilities, whether it's children, whether it's older relatives, whatever the case may be. They tend to carry more of the weight on that. They tend to have more management responsibility, which means they have the pressure of fee earning and managing teams. And sometimes the lure of sitting at home and being able to demarcate those responsibilities is so appealing. I can give that morning to supervision and then I can focus on client needs. And it's easier to do that at home when you can ignore the emails or just don't answer the phone. It's a lot harder in the office. And I think this is where listening to staff and balancing those competing priorities is now very critical, because experienced lawyers will have got used to being able to really separate out their different responsibilities, and bringing them back into the office and the thought of having juniors on the pod asking questions all day long can be quite daunting, I think, for a lot of managers. I think that can be quite a big adjustment to make again, particularly for new managers. So it's worth consulting. But I think you've got to balance that need to ensure your juniors can flourish and grow and get the supervision they need, and that teams can flourish and get cohesion where they've not had that for a long, long time. People have been recruited in, maybe never met their teams. It's so important to get the balance. And what we're seeing with some of the hybrid models is that firms are being a bit smart about this. And what they're doing is they're being a bit purposeful in how they do the hybrid working. So rather than saying, you know, it's a free for all, just take your home day whenever you want, they're actually being a bit targeted and saying, when we have core days when the whole team is together for collaboration, for training, for, you know, sharing knowledge, you know, and actually being a bit intentional about it, rather than just saying we're going to just have a hybrid policy that's, you know, that's very too flexible, really. So it's good to balance those competing priorities so that you can cater for everyone. And I think the third key point around keeping your employees in mind when settling on your policy is the critical need to re-establish culture and identity. And I think, as we all know, the culture and the identity of a business is based around the beliefs and the behaviors of the people that work for the business. And I think it's very difficult to see that in action when everyone's remote. I think that's really challenging. And I think lockdown has been so challenging for cohesion and culture and that sense of this is who we are as a business, and our people get it because they're faced with it day in, day out, and they're around people and they get a feel for what it means to be part of this business. And I'm working with one lawyer at the moment who took a job in September last year, interviewed remotely, joined the business remotely. They now have handed their notice in, they're moving on to a new job, and they went for their leaving drinks with their team. And it was the first time they had met their team at their leaving drinks. And I know that can sound a bit daft and like that might just be a one-off, but it's actually not. If you think about it, there's an awful lot of lawyers out there who have never really sat around a table and had a coffee or beer with their team. They've never had lunch with their team. And I think it's around those points that culture is established, that team identity is built, that a team dynamic is established. And I think that takes work, and it takes thought. And I think in your hybrid working model, you want to get the benefit of flexibility with that cohesion. And that's a fine balance that takes a lot of listening and a lot of thinking. And I think now is the time to get that right, because we have a unique opportunity here where we're bringing an entire workforce back into our office environment. And we've got a chance to get that right or get it wrong. And it's quite a unique point in time we have at the moment. So what are my 3 recommendations? Number 1, you have to ensure your hybrid policies work for both your staff and the business. And I'd encourage you to communicate that well. Employees don't like being told what's going to happen to them. They like being taken on the journey. They like being consulted, even if it's not exactly what they want at the end of the day. If they feel they've been taken on the journey, and even if it's not their ideal, but they get it because they're on the journey, they're more likely to buy into it and be able to accept it and work with it. So make sure it works for them, and that it actually is well communicated, because communication is key with all these things, particularly remotely. Number 2, keep well-being front and center of your plans, because it's not just about, well-being is not just something we're going to think a lot about and talk a lot about while we're in lockdown for our mental health preservation. It's now going to be as critical coming back to the office, because it's going to bring a host of mental health concerns for people around safety, around vaccinations, around am I going to be safe? Is it going to be, am I going to be in and out? Are my children going to be in school or out? Or there's so many factors coming back to the workplace that are going to be a well-being, high on the well-being agenda. And the reason well-being needs to be front and center of the way you communicate and the way you deliver the outcome of your consultation is it's not just about what you do, it's about how you do it. And so many times, I talked a lot about this last year, how you do something is often more important than what you actually do it. Because if you do it well, if you communicate well, if you look after your people, whatever side of the coin you fall on between the flex or the more rigid, if you do it well and you care for your people well, what they'll remember at the end of the day is how you did it. It's your legacy. It's what people will remember about the firm through these tough months. And I said it last year through all the lockdown. It's how you do it that they will remember more than what you actually did. So your legacy is being built through all of this. And then finally, number 3, third recommendation, don't miss this opportunity to get it right. Take your time over it. Really take your time over this return to work, because this is it is a trigger point for many people. And I think 60% of employees from our Pulse survey said that they would be looking for a job that offered hybrid or remote working if their employee didn't give it to them. Tells you that there's a sentiment out there that people are watching very carefully, and this is an opportunity for firms to get it right, because it's about your retention, but it's also about your attraction. If you can get it right and get the messaging right and get the optics right on it, you'll have a better chance of retaining your good talent, and you'll have a better chance of attracting good talent if there's a good news story out in the market. So those are my top 3 tips.